Some people are afraid of the dark. But what if the darkness is not empty? What if something has been standing beside you your entire life, silently watching, waiting, not to follow you, but to replace you? Rohan had never been afraid of shadows. Like everyone else, he believed they were nothing more than a reflection of light, a simple absence, a harmless copy of the body, something that disappears when the lights go out, something that has no mind, no will, no life of its own. At least, that's what he believed. Until one night, everything changed. It started with something small, something so small that Rohan almost ignored it. He was walking home late from work, the streetlights casting long shadows across the empty road. The night was quiet, too quiet. As he walked, he noticed his shadow stretching along the pavement beside him. It moved just as he did, step for step, perfectly normal. But then, he stopped walking, and for just a fraction of a second, his shadow didn't. Rohan frowned. He looked down again. Now the shadow was still, perfectly still, as if nothing had happened. He shook his head and laughed nervously. "Just my imagination," he whispered to himself. But something about it didn't feel right. That night, he couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he kept remembering that moment, that tiny delay, that impossible movement. At exactly 2:17 a.m., he finally gave up trying to sleep and walked into the kitchen for water. The dim yellow light flickered above him, and there it was again, his shadow, on the wall, still, silent, watching. Rohan raised his hand slowly. The shadow followed. He lowered it. The shadow followed again. Everything seemed normal, but then he quickly turned around, and for a split second, he saw it. The shadow was not in the same position as him. It was slightly turned, as if it had been looking somewhere else. Rohan's breath caught in his throat.
He turned back slowly. Now it matched him again, perfectly, like nothing had happened. The next day, things got worse. Rohan began noticing small changes. His shadow would stretch in the wrong direction. It would move slightly slower. Sometimes it looked taller than him, sometimes thinner. Sometimes it didn't look like him at all. Days passed, and the shadow became more independent. Rohan stopped going out at night. But even during the day, the shadow didn't behave normally. It lingered longer than it should. It moved when he stood still. It felt alive. One evening, as the sun was setting, Rohan stood in his room staring at the wall. The orange light filled the space, casting his shadow clearly in front of him. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just watched. And slowly, very slowly, the shadow lifted its arm, without him moving at all. Rohan stumbled backward in fear. His heart pounded violently in his chest. That's not possible. But deep inside, he knew it was. That night, he tried something different. He turned off all the lights in his house. Complete darkness, no shadows, no reflections, nothing. For the first time in days, he felt a sense of relief. But then, he heard something, a soft movement behind him, like someone shifting their weight. Slowly, carefully, Rohan turned around, and in the darkness, he saw something even more terrifying than the shadow. He saw nothing, because the shadow was no longer on the wall. The light suddenly flickered back on, and Rohan froze. The shadow had returned, but it wasn't behind him anymore. It was standing in front of him, not on the floor, not on the wall, but upright, like a person, like something that had stepped out of the darkness. Rohan couldn't move. The shadow slowly tilted its head, mimicking him, but not perfectly, not anymore. Then it took a step forward, and Rohan felt something impossible. His own body refused to move. The shadow moved again, closer this time, and with every step it took, Rohan felt weaker, colder, like something was being pulled out of him. Memories, thoughts, pieces of himself. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The shadow raised its hand, and touched him. Everything went dark. When Rohan opened his eyes, he was standing in his room. Everything looked normal. The light, the walls, the silence. He looked down and froze. There was no shadow beneath him. Panic rushed through his body. He ran to the mirror. His reflection looked normal, but something felt wrong, very wrong. Suddenly, he noticed movement behind him, on the wall. His shadow was there again, but this time, it was moving on its own. It raised its hand slowly and waved at him. Rohan stepped back in horror, but then something even more terrifying happened. The reflection in the mirror smiled, but Rohan didn't, and in that moment, he finally understood the truth. He was no longer himself. He was the shadow now, and the thing standing in his place, living his life, wearing his face, was never his shadow. He was something else, something that had been watching him for a very long time, waiting for the moment to step into the light and take his place. So if one day you notice your shadow moving just a little differently, just a little too late, or a little too soon, don't ignore it, because it might not be your shadow anymore, and by the time you realize the truth, you might already be standing on the wrong side of the light. If you enjoyed this mysterious story, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who loves dark stories, and subscribe to the channel for more stories, because tomorrow, another mystery will be waiting.